Thank you for listening to this Podcast One production. Now available on Apple Podcasts, Podcast One, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome. You're tuned in to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Along with me, the one, the only, the very talented Mr. Tim Dennis. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
We've got a great show lined up. I do want to remind people as well from these radio shows, I'm out working. We're back on the road filming Holzer Files, and we're getting some great stuff. I cannot wait for you guys to see what we're uncovering in Season 2. I have had some of the most profound moments in the paranormal field, some very emotional experiences, and I'm excited to talk with you guys and share these bits. But speaking of sharing, this Thursday is the third in a series of specials that I filmed. They were the Quarantine from Home specials, and I'll be sitting down with Amy Bruni, Adam Berry, Chip Coffey from Kindred Spirits, and we'll be discussing a very powerful and emotional episode that they were a part of and breaking it down. That airs this Thursday on the Travel Channel. The following week, on Thursday, I'll be joined by the Ghost Brothers. So we're going to have a good conversation going over some of their highlights, some of the funniest, most genuine, nice guys I've ever met in my life. And we've had a great time every time we've hung out together, and doing this episode is no different. There was a lot of fun moments, and I think you guys, if you're fans of the paranormal, you're going to really enjoy some of their insights and stories, behind-the-scenes bits. So that's coming up over the next 2 weeks. I hope that you enjoyed last week's Destination Fear special and the Holzer Files special Decrypted that we did 2 weeks ago. And if you're watching and like these things, tell the Travel Channel so that they continue giving you more. I mean, we've got a lot of shows to take a look back out. Ghosts of Morgantown, we've got Ghost Adventures, Ghost Nation, and Portals to Hell, just to name a few. So there are other programs we can move forward with on these specials, and I'd love to be a part of them. I hope you'll continue to watch them and give the love and support to the paranormal field that you always do. Speaking of love and support to the paranormal field, Tim, one of our all-time favorite guests is back. He was with us on Tuesday for our True Crime Tuesday program. He's back today, and we're going to talk about a really unique part in our history with two of the most well-known and recognized inventors in the world, Tesla and Edison, and their rivalry with one another that extended far beyond the equipment and experiments that many of us know about. They were also in a race to communicate and prove the existence of the afterlife. So today, talking about his book that's out, Edison versus Tesla, The Battle Over Their Last Invention, co-written by Joel Martin and William Birnes. We have Bill Birnes back with us. He's a New York Times best-selling author of The Day After Roswell and many other books, including the Skyhorse titles Dr. Feelgood and his brand new companion, which we just featured on our show this last Tuesday, the Dr. Feelgood Casebook. He's also written Wounded Minds, the Big Book of UFO Facts, Figures, and Truth. He was a consulting producer, writer, and lead host of History Channel's UFO Hunters and the publisher of UFO Magazine from 1998 through 2014. He is back with us. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bill.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dave. Glad to hear that you're getting a second season for the Holzer Files. I think that's fabulous.
Yeah, we got our second season, started filming it, and unfortunately the COVID crisis shut us down after episode 5. So that left us a lot of work. We're back out. We filmed a couple of episodes, and I'll tell you, Bill, I'm really impressed. I was nervous about going back out in the field, but our production company and crew is taking such good care of everyone. We're being tested, our temperatures every day. Everybody is quarantined to their room when we're not on set. Everybody is required to wear masks, take care of themselves. We've got hand sanitizing stations everywhere. And then after we get done filming, we return to our rooms where we stay. So there's a lot of protection in place for doing this. So I wanted to address that because I know a lot of listeners have written into me saying that they're worried about my health and safety. The production company has assured me that if at any time we feel unsafe, uncomfortable, we will wrap and go home. But as long as we're continuing to follow these safety protocols and be careful, I'm excited to be back out in the field. And Bill, we've had some crazy experiences in season 2, and I'll have to talk to you off air because I wanted to pick your brain on a couple of instances of things that are going on and get your input and advice. But today, talking about communicating with the other side, obviously that's a big faction of these programs. We're trying to communicate not just a flash or a glimpse, a radio burst from the other side that seems to, answer one of our questions but stops there, but this two-way communication and back and forth. Did both Tesla and Edison believe this was a real possibility, that we were talking to the dead, or that possibility, or talking to alternate realities or parallel universes? What was their real belief behind their interest in this field?
Edison's belief was absolutely, he wanted to talk to the dead. And Edison tried to find, given what Hans Holzer spent his life trying to prove and investigate, Edison believed that there was a scientific basis for everything that Hans Holzer was trying to prove. And that scientific basis, Edison said, had been investigated ever since the ancient Greeks, the ancient Athenians, all the way right through to the turn of the 20th century into the 1920s. Remember, Edison was writing about communicating with the dead in the wake, and this is why I think it's so relevant today, because he was doing this in the wake of and during the end period of the 1918 Great Spanish Flu, from 1918 to 1920. Exactly the same thing that Max Jacobson, Dr. Feelgood, was dealing with in his medical experimentation. But for Edison, it was different. Edison believed that there was a scientific basis for a version of consciousness after the death of the body. In fact, what's so fascinating about this, Tesla also believed that, but he believed it in a different way. What Edison believed is, and he wrote this in his journal, and his journal, the Journal of Life and Death, his journal was so woo-woo, was so far out there that Edison's own children took the chapters of Edison speculating about the nature of life and death and consciousness and cut them out of his journal. Because Edison, at the time he was writing this in the 1920s, was also on the board of General Electric, the company he founded. And when the board members of GE found out that Tesla was investigating life after death and talking to ghosts and talking to spirits and said that even rocks and dirt and trees had a consciousness, they freaked out. And they demanded from the other board members that Edison stop his experiments, which he did. And they also told his children, take those chapters out of his journal. I found the missing chapters in a French translation from 1938 and put them in the book Edison versus Tesla. So that's the first time Edison's musings on life and death and consciousness after death has ever been in print for the first time.
Was there something that drove Edison in his fascination with communicating to the other side? Anything specific other than just wild ideas?
No. Something very specific. And this is what's so fascinating about Thomas Edison, the inventor, Thomas Edison, the business person, and Thomas Edison, just the pure scientist. Let's just take each one. As an inventor, Thomas Edison was, just like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison believed that inventions, consumer-based inventions, and believe me, this guy had his experience with inventions that had no market. For example, all the way back at the end of the 19th century, Edison invented a way to make a voting machine, a voting tabulating machine that automatically tabulated the votes. So he tried to sell this thing to all these political parties, especially in Boston, and nobody wanted it. Why? Because the politicians were so busy stuffing ballot boxes that the last thing they wanted was an automatic electrical tabulating machine for a vote counting. Edison learned the lesson. Don't invent something that nobody wants. So what did he do? He looked at Alexander Graham Bell's telephone and saw that the telephone, it was a great idea, but it basically, I mean, no offense, didn't work because you had to shout into the receiver to get enough vibrations going into the next room so that somebody can pick up the receiver at the other end. So Edison invented basically the carbon transmitter, and it basically transformed telephonic communications at the turn of the century. When Edison discovered that somebody had figured out how separate static photographs taken in succession look like movement, look like animation, that's when he invented sprockets on celluloid film, and that gave us the first motion picture. So Edison improved a lot of stuff. But as an inventor, at the tail end of the Spanish flu and at the tail end of World War II, when millions and millions of people were dying right before his very eyes, Edison thought to himself, gee, what if there were a way for the bereaved to talk to the loved one they lost? What if he could figure out a way to do that? So his theory was, again, his purpose was this would be the greatest consumer invention of all time. In fact, Edison's theory was so correct about a consumer product to allow you to talk to the dead that there's a television show right now that's getting its second season called Upload. And what's it about? It's about a machine that uploads human consciousness to a server where the departed can live out their lives in full eternity if somebody pays the bill, and if they have a trust fund to do it. And as far as they're concerned, they're still alive, even though they're dead. Well, that was Edison's whole theory, that consciousness can be preserved after the death of the body. So he began this intense research into the nature of consciousness. And what Edison came up with, by the way, is exactly the same theory that many theoretical physicists, including Roger Penrose and others, are talking about today, that consciousness is separate from the human body. So Edison studied the theories of quantum physics by Heisenberg, by Max Planck, and determined that the quanta are actually life units, and that everything on this planet is composed of life units. And as far as human beings are concerned, after the death of the body where these life units reside, they, for a period of time, are free-floating units that can be contacted. So that's the consumer part of him. Now, the science part of him was, okay, if they're free-floating units, if they're free-floating, how do you measure them? How do you contact them? Well, Edison had already invented the motion picture projector, throwing a beam of light, basically photons, onto a screen. So Edison figured out this. He said, what if I had the beam so narrow that it was almost like a single photon, a narrow beam hitting a light meter? And what if I could convince the life units, the consciousness, the discarnate consciousness of a recently departed person to cross that photon beam and interrupt the flow of photons? Well, if they were hitting a light meter, I would immediately see it on that light meter because the dial would fluctuate. And if that light meter were wired into a voltmeter, I could see the strength of that electrical charge from those light units. And if I could figure out a way to get them to cross that light beam back and forth, I could use what I know about Morse code to come up with a language to communicate with them. That was Edison's theory.
Did he, now I guess I realized this first through your book, but he had a near-death experience himself?
Oh, sure. All the way in, Edison died in, I think, 1932. And, but before he actually died, he had slipped into a coma. And in his coma, he actually saw the light being beamed down. He walked to the light, and he actually experienced what it was like on the other side of life. So when he woke up from his coma, he actually said to his children who were there, that this was in Florida. He'd moved from New Jersey to Florida. He actually said to his children, I know that I was right because I went to the other side and have come back, so I know that I'm right. And he died a few weeks later.
I mean, that's pretty powerful. Again, you've got a guy who, you know, was hyper intelligent, was always looking to break boundaries, understand, and push further than we had maybe gone before. And he comes back from this experience. And I guess, you know, the skeptics can toss it out and say your brain is being deprived of oxygen or blood, or, you know, he's sick, he's dealing with this, and his brain is creating these patterns. But the fact that his brain is doing it the same way as so many others and having the same type of experiences with their, you know, his own connections, seems like we shouldn't just be throwing the baby out with the bathwater in those instances, Bill. Like, there really is something there that, you know, that supersedes our physical form and continues on in a conscious way.
You're absolutely right. And the fascinating thing that you just mentioned, which medical doctors have actually proven through interviews, is that people from different backgrounds, different countries, different, both men and women, boys and girls, especially children, what they do, and I've got my own personal story to tell you, they say they've all experienced the same thing during near-death experiences. So if it was simply a function of an individual's brain, why would the biology from brain to brain be so similar? It's the same kind of thing. And so this experience I had was with my mother-in-law, who was dying of cancer, and she was in hospice care. And there's a hospice nurse that would show up every day. And so one day she was saying, I keep seeing my mother. She's standing over in the corner of the room. And she was like really happy. And so when the hospice nurse came, she said that to the hospice nurse. And the hospice nurse, just without batting an eye, and I can't even tell you, I can't even express the normality of what this hospice nurse said. She said it as a matter of fact, not as a matter of faith, not as a matter of conjecture, and not speculation. She said, just like I would say to you, that's a blue car across the street. She said, oh, no, that's just your mother. Welcome you to the other side. This is a nurse.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, it's great that there are people like that in that position that know and can help us through that and help our loved ones that are going through that understand what's happening too.
That's right. And so afterwards, the nurse says, look, all death is a transition to another part of existence. And I'm listening to her and saying, you mean death isn't death? And she said, no, it's not. It's simply a transition to something else. So, and that's one medical healthcare professional.
Now, this concept, and obviously this was at the end of his life, having this spiritual way, did he ever actually create, do you believe, something that could tap into the other side? I know there's been a lot of people claiming that they have seen the diagram for this telephone to the dead, that he has mentioned it, but how far in concept to proven fact did he actually take it?
He took it so far, and if you're looking for an episode on the Holzer files, believe me, can set you up. He took this so far that he actually built this. And on one really dark, late November night in 1920, in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey, Menlo Park, the wind was howling outside. There was a storm. What he did was he assembled a bunch of clairvoyants, almost like the early 20th century version of remote viewers, of clairvoyants and mediums. And even though he didn't really believe in things like Ouija boards and crystal balls and tea leaves and things like that, he said, no, let's give them their due. So a friend of his had recently died, one of the people who worked in his lab. And on that night, he built this invention. And I know how he built it. He left his diagrams. They're still at the Edison Museum. He left his diagrams. He built it. We can rebuild something like this. It is not impossible to rebuild. And he built this, and he set it up. And then on one side of the beam, he had his clairvoyants and mediums to call for the spirits of the dead, of the recently departed. I think the name was Bill Birnes, to call for the name of this recently departed person. And that's exactly what they did. And Edison waited until he could see a disruption in the light meter. But one of his assistants, before the night was over, demanded that he stop and said, this was heresy, this was blasphemy, you can't do this. And that was the one experiment that Edison did. My theory has always been, repeat the experiment. I know how I built the machine. He left all the diagrams for that machine. In fact, I think he printed that in Modern Mechanics in 1920 in that magazine. Build it. Do the experiment. Let's see what happens. Do it at Edison's lab in Menlo Park, which is now a museum.
Now, this rivalry, of course, we know between Tesla and Edison. Were they discussing with one another when they were working together the concepts of this, or did each man individually come up with the concept of trying to communicate with the dead? Edison and Tesla
only worked a very short time together. From the time that he was a student, an advanced student in electrical engineering in Europe, Tesla believed there was a fundamental mistake in Edison's development of direct current. Because Tesla said that the problem with direct current was that it wasn't a powerful current. That literally, when you look at what it did, you had to have a very powerful turbo or a very powerful turbine that could only generate the electron flow for a mile, 2 miles. Then you needed relay stations across. So it was really expensive, and you could not deliver electrical power to rural locations. And you had to have actually home-based power plants. That's what's so funny about today's modern Tesla batteries that Elon Musk is doing, because that was the Elon Musk to heat your home with your own power generators. That was exactly Nikola Tesla's theory, that each person, if they used Edison's direct current, would have to have. Tesla's theory was that if you swung that electrical pole from positive to negative, you'd build up so much power. In the world of electrical engineering, it's called potential, that you could generate the electron flow further along down the line. In fact, you could experiment with this yourself. If you walk along a flat piece of street, just walk in your hole in your house, flat piece of pavement, keep walking, you'll use the same energy that you use for every step. Now try climbing a hill. And the steeper the hill you have to, the more potentia you have to exert to climb the hill. That was Tesla's theory, that the current could travel faster. Well, Edison said, hey, this is a stupid theory because the current will be so powerful. If somebody touched a live wire, the person would be electrocuted immediately. That's why Edison then invented the transformer. The transformer stepped current down from the power supply to the local user. That was the reverse of a Tesla coil. So Tesla actually proved that his theory of alternating current would work. So they became rivals. And they became rivals so intensely that they each had spies in one another's laboratory. So when Tesla found out that Edison was working on a method to talk to the dead, Tesla's theory, which was the theory from the old Superman comics back from the 1950s and the 40s and 50s, Tesla's theory was that just like Albert Einstein's theory, energy and matter can never be destroyed. They exist forever. There's no such thing as destroying matter. You simply convert it to energy, heat energy, or propulsion, and that energy itself can't be destroyed. It simply goes on forever. So his theory was that everybody who speaks generates sound waves, vibrations, sound waves. The sound waves keep traveling forever. If you could go all the way out into space, off the Earth, and had an ability, a tuner that could tune into the precise sound waves you're looking for, you would hear the voices of the dead. In other words, EVP. That was Tesla's theory. And Tesla was so embraced this theory that he believed that there were aliens living outside our solar system, and if he could find the right frequency, he could communicate with them. That was his theory. So two different inventors, both of whom, by the way, were nominated for the Nobel Prize, but they each wouldn't accept the Nobel Prize because the other person was sharing the prize with them. They each had the same theory that you could get that the particles of life, either particles of sound and light or light units, existed after the death of the body, and you could communicate with them and develop a code to talk to them, and hence you would have a phone to talk to the dead. That was the theory.
Now, you said that Edison took it to that level. Did Tesla ever create a prototype to actually try to communicate with the other side, the alternate universes, parallel worlds, whatever it was he believed he was trying to communicate with?
Yes. And he did it all the way out at the edge of Long Island. Remember, he was trying to build these massive towers because his belief was that, this was Tesla, his belief was that the Earth itself was a great source of energy and power. And if he could build a tower high enough and powerful enough, he could direct radio waves anywhere he wanted to, especially out into the universe and especially out to the dead. So he tried to build this incredible tower at the edge of Long Island, but at the start of World War I, what the United States Navy said was that the German U-boats that were hovering off the end of Long Island, a lot of stories about that were hovering off the end of Long Island, could use that radio tower as a signal beacon, and they destroyed it. Wardenclyffe.
I have an interesting theory one of our listeners brought up to us earlier this year, Bill, and I'd love your thoughts on this. When we examine many hauntings that are reported, they seem to be spirits from the late 1800s, early 1900s. This was really during the peak of the spiritualist movement. Plus, you've got guys like Tesla and Edison creating equipment and trying to communicate, and not just with the living, but the dead. Is there a chance that we called these spirits forward and may have created this pocket universe here amongst us, and that's why that grouping of hauntings are so widely seen? We're not seeing Roman gladiators. We're not seeing the fawns. We're not seeing, bell-bottomed, bushy-haired 70s people. It seems like the main aspect of the hauntings are the late 1800s, early 1900s during this zeal to communicate. It has gotten bigger over the last, 15, 20 years now that the paranormal is on TV and prevalent on every station. But do you think that there's a chance that us calling them forth, utilizing different technologies, doing things may actually, be why that's the strongest area of hauntings that exist today?
Well, speaking as a long-haired, bell-bottom wearing 1970s person, I no longer have bell bottoms. I no longer have that hair. We're still alive, so that's the good news. The virus is the bad news. But sometimes what we when Joe Martin and I wrote the book "The Haunting of the President" years and years ago about ghosts in the White House. There are ghosts in the White House. I mean, Lincoln, for example, Lincoln's ghost. Lincoln was a spiritualist. I mean, for all of the pragmatism that Lincoln had to exert in order to fight the Civil War, he was a spiritualist. And one of the great stories about ghosts in high places was that after the White House was built on a swamp, right? So when Trump says drain the swamp, it was built on a swamp. That was the whole point of the why they got the land so cheap in the District of Columbia. It was built on a swamp, and the White House water system was tainted. It was tainted with viruses and bacteria. Willie Lincoln died of typhus, Abraham Lincoln's youngest son. And Willie Lincoln's death so struck Mary Todd Lincoln. Mary Todd Lincoln was, by the way, she was clinically depressed. I mean, it was literally clinical depression. Lincoln was bipolar. And so it so struck Mary Todd Lincoln that she refused to leave her bedroom, just refused to leave it. Well, how could you have a first lady who refused to leave the bedroom? Well, you did just in 2017 when Melania wouldn't move to the White House. But Mary Todd Lincoln wouldn't leave the bedroom because she was so distraught over the death of Willie Lincoln. So here's what Abraham Lincoln did, and this is where the story gets crazy. Abraham Lincoln found this young, she was still a teenager, called Nettie Coburn. She was a spiritualist. And he invited Nettie Coburn to the White House to give seances. And Nettie Coburn, this is in the White House, would basically invoke spirits. And in the one place she would invoke spirits is today the Lincoln bedroom. And so she invoked the spirit of Willie Lincoln. And when Mary Todd Lincoln could hear through Nettie Coburn that Willie Lincoln was safely on the other side, that he was not sick anymore, that he was happy, which is what she told Willie Lincoln's mother, Mary Todd Lincoln, she calmed down and resumed her role as the nation's first lady. Well, Abraham Lincoln was so impressed by Nettie Coburn's ability that he began having regular seances in the White House. He was inviting the cabinet members to bring in all their problems, like William Seward, who was the Secretary of Defense, to bring in all their problems, and he would solve them. It was Nettie Coburn who told Lincoln that the North would win the war. But then there was a period of time when Lincoln was musing over this document that had been drafted, the Emancipation Proclamation. Were you to read the Republican presidential platform of 1860, and I urge all the listeners to go online and download, because it's there, the Republican presidential, Lincoln's campaign platform from 1860. It was the first presidential platform of the Republican Party. Lincoln was the first Republican Party candidate. Read that platform. And what you'll see is that Abraham Lincoln and the Republican Party had promised to leave the economies of the southern states in place. That was his campaign promise, not to touch the economies of the southern states. Well, without going into any detail, you can imagine what that means. So when the time came for the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln had a crisis of conscience. He said, I made a campaign promise not to touch the southern states, only to preserve the Union, not to touch the economies of the southern states. What do I do? So he called his clairvoyant, Nettie Coburn, back to the White House, and she invoked the spirit of the great New England orator, Daniel Webster. And Daniel Webster, according to Nettie Coburn, it's in her book, Daniel Webster told from the dead, told Abraham Lincoln that history, that he had to get on the right side of history, that history demanded that the United States, just like Mexico, just like the European countries, must abolish slavery forever. And that's what Lincoln did, and he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, and then he authorized the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, and later on the 14th Amendment. So that's how spiritualism and ghosts played a role in American history. And Lincoln's ghost, according to Ronald Reagan's own daughter, Maureen Reagan, Lincoln's ghost inhabits the White House today. Maureen Reagan, the late Maureen Reagan, who died of cancer years ago, once said that when she would sleep in a Lincoln bedroom, she would smell this intense cigar smoke. And one day she opened the door, and there was Abraham Lincoln smoking his cigar in a stovepipe hat, and she said she would never enter the Lincoln bedroom again. And she wasn't the only person. The other person who said that was Winston Churchill, who was visiting Franklin Delano Roosevelt at the White House. So these are the people. And Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands during World War II, she was visiting the White House. They all saw Lincoln's ghost. And you know who else saw Lincoln's ghost?
Who's that?
President Eisenhower. He saw Lincoln's ghost standing at on one of the corridors of the second floor of the White House. And when he had an engineer examine it, he realized the whole White House was in a state of collapse, and they had to shore up the entire building. That's ghosts in the White House.
So it obviously such a widespread phenomena. People from all walks of life, from, lowly radio show hosts to presidents of the United States, have witnessed spirits or believe that hauntings occur. You've got two men on the cutting edge and forefront of technology and understanding what technology is capable of, both fascinated with making communication with the other side, both competitors for that era. We have to take a break. We'll come back. When we come back, Edison versus Tesla, the battle over their last invention. Our guest today, William Birnes, Bill Birnes, when we return right here to Darkness Radio.
Do you experience stress? Do you have anxiety? Do you have chronic pain? Do you have trouble sleeping at least once a week? You know you're not alone. Many of us do. I know I do. I've got all four of them. I've told you about them many, many times, but I'll tell you, as I have many times before, everything hurts except for the tip of this pinky on my left hand. I'm showing it to you right now. I know you can't see it because it's radio, but everything hurts. My neck, my back, my knees, my elbows, my shoulders, my everything. I've got arthritis. I've got herniated and bulging discs in my neck and back. I've got torn ligaments. I've got knees that need to be replaced. You name it, I've got it. So that means I need help. I need help with pain relief. I need help with the anxiety that comes with pain relief, because you know that every once in a while you just want to crawl out of your skin because you know that there's that much pain that you just can't take it anymore, and you don't know how to handle it. And I do have trouble sleeping because of that pain. And there's only so many pills that you can take. There's only so much you can do. There's only so many clinics you can go to. There's only so much you can do to try and get out of that pain. I was searching for anything that would help, and then I discovered Feels. What is Feels, you may ask yourself? Well, Feels is premium CBD delivered directly to your doorstep. And what does Feels do? Well, Feels naturally helps reduce stress, anxiety, pain, and sleeplessness. And I'll tell you, Feels has helped quite a bit with that pain. And a lot of people have emailed me, and thank you for emailing me. Continue to email me because I'll continue to encourage you. That Feels is not that typical pill that they give you when you go to the pain clinic. It's not an opioid. It's CBD. It's all natural. It's like taking ibuprofen. It doesn't give you that loginess. It doesn't give you that hangover. It's like taking ibuprofen. You place a few drops of Feels under your tongue and you feel the difference within minutes. The thing to remember about CBD is that you got to find your right dose. You got to get there, and every dose is different. Me, I take a dropper full in the morning, and I take a dropper full in the evening, and it gets me to the point where it eases that pain so that I can sleep, so that I can get through my day, so I can sit here and I can do these podcasts with you, and I can function during the day, and I can sleep well at night. Leave some room to experiment over the course of a week or so. You may need to take more or less to get the effects that you're after. Now, although I'm available and I can help you, the real support comes from the folks at Feels, and they're great about getting to you and answering your questions, because I don't have all the answers. Even though I've been using Feels for quite a while, I kind of got the hang of it, but the folks at Feels, they're the experts. If you are new to CBDs, Feels offers a free CBD hotline to help guide you through your personal experience, and they are wonderful. They're there for you all the time, and they have the answers. They can help you on your program with Feels and help you get to the point where you are feeling better. Feel better naturally with Feels. They work naturally to help you feel better. Again, there's no high, there's no hangover or addiction with CBD. You just simply feel better when you're using Feels. You can join the Feels community to get Feels delivered directly to your door every month. That's what's great about Feels. Join the Feels community, and it keeps coming to your doorstep. You'll save money on every order, and you can pause or cancel at any time. Although, again, I've said it to you every week, I don't know why you'd want to stop getting Feels. Once you start feeling better, by gosh, you're not going to want to stop. But hey, if you want to, it's your prerogative. You can stop or pause or cancel at any time. Feels has me feeling my best every day, and it can help you too. Become a member today by going to feels.com/darkness, and you'll get 50% off your first order with free shipping. That's feals.com/darkness to become a member and get 50% automatically taken off your first order with free shipping. Feals.com/darkness. One more time, feals.com/darkness to become a member and get 50% automatically taken off your first order with free shipping. Do yourself a favor. Take away your stress. Take away your anxiety. Get out of chronic pain. Start sleeping, for God's sakes. Do yourself that favor. Start treating yourself instead of beating yourself up. Go to feals.com/darkness today. Become a member. Get 50% automatically taken off your first order with free shipping. Do it today.
We're back. Remember, if you'd like to get a copy of this book, we've got a link for it on today's program, so you can find it on today's program. And any of the books that you're interested in on this show, we have featured in our shop at darknessradio.com. If you click on the shop tab, store tab there, it'll take you into a page. You can click on that. It'll take you right into our Amazon storefront, where we have collected all the true crime books. We have collected all of the paranormal books in another subject section. We've got paranormal swag. We've got things to do and watch. So there's a lot of cool items. Go in, use that link, go in and make your purchases. Every purchase, a very, very, very small percentage goes to Darkness Radio. It does not affect the seller in any way, shape, or form, or you, the buyer. The prices are the same as if you went in directly through Amazon. It's just part of the affiliate program and helps support the program. So please bear that in mind and go check that out when you're making purchases. And once you're in our shop, when you start searching other items, that also helps us. So when you purchase any other items through our link. So consider bookmarking that link and making that your purchase point of entry every time you go to Amazon.com. Edison versus Tesla, the battle over their last invention. Now, Let's dig a little deeper into the whole concept of the communication and death and the idea of ghosts. I know that they were both fascinated with this aspect, but if I understand this correctly, Tesla also believed he was in fact picking up or possibly communicating with something on Mars. Is that right, Bill?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Tesla believed that the voices of let's just call them life forms, as opposed to Martians or Venusians or things like that. He believed that there were voices, communication signals from other planets that were constantly bombarding Earth. Well, he believed there were voices of the dead were still lingering in the atmosphere, that they never dissipated. So he claimed at one point, this is Tesla, that he was actually communicating with aliens from Mars. He believed that he could communicate with aliens from Venus because he believed, just like people from the 17th century forward believed, that there were life forms that existed throughout the known universe. I mean, this isn't a 20th century or even a 19th century phenomenon. All the way back in the 17th century, the best-selling book in Europe was a book by this French philosopher who said that the entire universe was populated with life forms, and that human beings could communicate with those life forms. And the people who believed in this, so this wasn't just Nikola Tesla, crazy Tesla, the people who believed in this theory, it was called the plurality of worlds. The people who believed in this, get this, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. So when Tesla said he could communicate with spirits, and when he said he could communicate with ghosts, these were common belief systems. In fact, it was George Washington's ghost that helped the Union Army win the Battle of Gettysburg, according to a former Secretary of the Army who became the governor of Maine. So when Tesla believed that he could communicate with these discarnate spirits on Earth or alien voices from Mars or from Venus, he actually said that he did do that.
What type of communication did he believe he was getting? Was it spoken word? Was it mathematical equations? Was it radio echo and effect? What exactly was he defining?
It was radio. Tesla was he believed that radio waves held the secret to everything because they were eternal. They never ended. So if somebody on Mars was having a conversation with somebody else on Mars, those sound waves would eventually could be picked up from Earth. He believed that radio waves traveling at the speed of light, that was the secret to all forms of communication. And so he said he actually heard alien voices from distant planets. Nobody believed him, but that's what he wrote about in his diary, and that's what he wrote about in the notes that he took. And in fact, it was those notes, those very notes, that after Tesla's death at the New Yorker Hotel, in 1943 that the United States government seized and sheltered and locked up in the Office of Alien Properties until Marshal Tito, after World War II was over. Marshal Tito demanded them for the Tesla Museum in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. Except for one series of notes that never left the United States and went to Wright Field in Ohio, and those were Tesla's notes on anti-gravity that the government did not give to the Yugoslavians, but gave instead to the Air Materiel Command, General Nathan Twining at Wright Field. When did they give it to them? In September 1947, after the crash at Roswell.
That's remarkable. So do you believe then what he was hearing was truly some form of transmission from those planets, or could it have been bounce back or echo of radio waves from our own planet?
No, I believe that he was actually hearing transmissions from other planets. Why do I believe that? Because we're hearing them today. FSD, fast radio bursts, FRBs, fast radio bursts. These fast radio bursts are these momentary bursts they look like artificial signals that come from somewhere outside our galaxy. We're getting them now. In fact, there's a very famous one. It's called, that SETI talks about, that Seth Shostak, who's the head of SETI, he talks about, called the WOW signal. You've heard about that. A scientist in California picked up on his radio telescope. Talk about carrying on Tesla's work. We have radio telescopes now at Arecibo in Puerto Rico. This scientist picked up this radio burst that looked like it was actually a radio transmission from something, an artificial transmission. So on that printout of that signal, he wrote the words "wow," and that became known as the WOW signal. That's exactly what Tesla predicted.
That's pretty remarkable. But these WOW signals, I mean, that one never repeated. Now they have found a signal that they're noticing repeats every 120 days or so for a short window.
Yes.
But they're wondering if this is more of a natural phenomena of something radioactive from the planets or some passing body through that area that is creating this disturbance, as opposed to actual, as we understand them, radio bursts. So do you believe that he was, that these are messages that are trying to make their way here to us, or are these byproducts of space?
They could be byproducts of communication in space. I mean, let's flip the script on this, or let's flip the frame. What would it be like if, I have my own theories about this, what would it be like if on a far distant planet somebody was picking up radio signals from Earth? Or would they pick up I Love Lucy? Or would they pick up a series of radio transmissions almost random, depending upon the strength of the signal, the orientation of the planets, the length of time it took for a signal to travel that many light years away? It may well be that a civilization on a very distant, on a planet in a distant constellation outside of our galaxy is picking up radio transmissions from our own satellites on a very random basis, depending upon when that satellite is in position around the Earth to transmit a signal that can be picked up in outer space. So there could be people or life forms on a distant planet in a distant galaxy picking up our own transmissions and saying the same thing you're asking me.
I wish, in the diaries and things that Tesla left behind, was he ever specific to what the messages were? Obviously, they weren't speaking English, or were they? Was that his claims?
No. Tesla's claim was in his diaries, and he wrote very extensive diaries. In fact, what the plan is for our publishing company, Shadowlawn Press, is that we're going to be publishing later on this year, probably after the summer, Tesla's diaries. Because Tesla wrote some very extensive diaries, very extensive notes that have not seen the light of day. And we have some of them, and I'm going to put together a book that, and I'll find one of the many Tesla scholars, not myself, that can write about it, and we'll publish that. But Tesla couldn't translate the signals, and that's what he was working on, trying to figure out a way, if there's a code in the signals, what are the signals saying? But he was picking up signals.
And of course, unfortunately, nothing was recorded, but did he give the coordinates of where he was receiving the signals from?
He said he was receiving signals from Mars, the direction of Mars. He couldn't tell whether it was coming from the surface of Mars or not, but it was the direction of Mars and the direction of Venus. So whether they were actual life forms that he claimed to be hearing or simply radio bursts that came from the direction of those planets, he wasn't clear. But he did talk about voice signals, really, from different planets that he was able to distinguish.
Do you believe that there was any madness to either one of their concepts? When you're doing everything you're doing, you're seeing so many different plans, ideas, and obviously Edison working in the patent office, seeing things come through all the time. Do you believe that any of it was ever just trying to be revolutionary and not necessarily, or maybe the word is not revolutionary, but exploitative to the situations? It was a time of a lot of death, a time of war and disease, and people wanting to reach through the veil to communicate. Do you think that there was any exploitative aspects to what these gentlemen were looking into, as opposed to it being science?
Absolutely. Absolutely, that was true. I mean, as inventors, as consumer, look at what Tesla ultimately invented. He invented the power source that everybody in the world is using today. He was for all of his craziness, and believe me, he had problems. For all of his craziness, he was a brilliant consumer-oriented inventor who brought us the electrical grid we have today. In addition to other things, Tesla was experimenting with television signals in the 1920s. Tesla invented the first, what we have today. Look at the F-35. How does the F-35 manipulate its weaponry? It does it through radio signals. It uses radar signals to identify different targets, then automatically align itself to lock onto those targets, then fire on those multiple targets, keeping them all in range. This is modern warfare. This is drone warfare. This is anti-missile warfare. Who invented this? Nikola Tesla, all the way back right before World War I. He invented the theory of the radio-controlled torpedo, which we have today. 2, the radio-controlled warship, and the which we have today, and the radio-controlled soldier, which is a robot, which we have today. He invented the theories for those, but Thomas Edison was on the Naval War Board at the time. And he was still smarting from Tesla's defeating him by providing the lighting and the electricity for the Chicago World's Fair 20 years earlier. So he was so furious, he said, none of these things will work. They're all garbage. And he shut Tesla down. That's how angry he was about what Tesla had done. Well, one of the arguments that Thomas Edison used is that if Tesla has a radio frequency that he's using to guide his radio torpedoes, anybody else on that frequency could jam what Tesla was trying to do, right? If you hijack the frequency, it's called spoofing. You could basically turn the actual device back on the person who sent it. along came movie actress Hedy Lamarr and her friend, composer George Antheil, who said, what if we had a way to change the frequency of that radio, to take Tesla's idea of a radio transmission for a weapon, but change the frequency so that the transmitter and the receiver are changing the frequency at the exact same time, then a jamming mechanism couldn't interfere. And that was called spread spectrum technology, invented by Hedy Lamarr all the way back before World War II. It got a patent. It was never used. Sylvania bought the patent when it expired. And now it is in common practice in the United States and in all militaries around the world, spread spectrum technology to prevent things from being jammed. That's what Tesla had first proposed as a radio-guided weapon. That's what Edison tried to develop, and that's in use today. So even from the point of view of taking a consumer device, radio, consumer device, and applying it to military technology, Edison and Tesla were still in conflict with each other about this. It's a fascinating story.
This rivalry between these two, do you believe that that's what pushed them both to become so good? Because one couldn't exist without the other? Or is that just a Hollywood romanticized version of what these two gentlemen were?
Well, it's in part a Hollywood romanticized version because each person had his own vision of how he saw the future. I mean, for Thomas Edison, who actually for American society holds this status, Thomas Edison, along with Henry Ford, but it was really Thomas Edison, toward the end of the 19th century, we've all heard the stories of the Gilded Age, right? Of the Goulds, of the Astors, of all these powerful Rockefellers, these powerfully rich families who lived this Gilded Age life. We're seeing part of that now, right? Because there was a break between the very, very rich, talk about the 1%, Bernie Sanders, the 1%, that break, and the rest of society, the working classes. And there was no way, really, for people from the working classes to break into the 1% because circa 1890, the world didn't have a consumer class of goods. It was Thomas Edison who invented consumerism by inventing motion pictures, by perfecting the radio, look at what Thomas Edison wound up inventing. 3 major industries, the telephone industry, telecommunications, the recording industry, think of how much money rappers are making today, the recording industry, and the motion picture industry. 3 of the most important communications industries that have driven the consumer economy from the beginning of the 20th century for over 100 years. That's what Edison did. Tesla invented his own consumer function. What Tesla invented was the municipal power grid, the very thing we're using right now. So when you consider what these two inventors did in their respective worlds, they created the modern consumer goods economy. And Henry Ford as well. So yes, each in his own way has dramatically influenced, has basically transformed society.
I appreciate that. Like I said, I wasn't sure if they, you're right. I mean, each one was doing these things independently of one another, but pushing each other to greater heights, right? I mean, hating to be outdone by the other, they may have created things that they may not have pushed themselves as hard on to get to. But what a fascinating rivalry and a fascinating time for two of these geniuses to kind of coexist at the same point with very similar concepts and ideas. But do you think it was the similarity that drove a wedge? It was the egos of each that caused this rift between them?
Well, it was two things. It was egos and money. I mean, where this started was Tesla, from the time he was an engineering student in Paris, he considered Edison his master. He thought Edison was the most genius bestowed upon inventor in history. And he wanted to work for him. So he got his professors in Europe to write these letters of recommendation. He traveled to New York. He presented them to Edison, who gave him a job at his electrical works. And Tesla believed Tesla and Edison were diametrically different in the way they conceived of their technology. For Edison, he believed in trial and error. When you said, "Oh, Professor Edison, you failed again to create this invention," Edison would say, "I didn't fail to create the invention. I just eliminated one possible theory. Now I'm going to go on to the next theory." So he was like the Arthur Conan Doyle inventor, the process of elimination. Tesla was different. Tesla had what we call an ideographic memory. Tesla could create an image in his mind down to the last little bolt or screw or washer, and then basically translate that vision in his mind onto a piece of paper. That's how he created the electrical turbine to generate alternating current. So by the time he came to the United States, he believed his mission was he could make Edison far more money by simply dropping direct current and adopting his alternating current. But for Edison, who'd gotten patents, who'd done all the engineering, who'd done all the industrial development on direct current, Tesla's theory was a challenge. Why would you, he would say to Tesla, why would you want me to rip apart everything I've built on a theory that, quite frankly, is untested? That's why the Chicago World's Fair was so important, because that was Tesla's first proof of concept for his theory. So the two of them were rivals about that, but they were working. But Tesla was working for Edison. He just couldn't convince him to adopt alternating current. Finally, on one day, one of the major generators failed at Edison's power plant over on Pearl Street in New York. So he says to Tesla, "Listen, I need this up and running by Monday morning. I need it fixed. Can you fix this?" Tesla looked at it. He said, "I believe I can." Edison said to Tesla, "Okay, look, here's the check." Edison writes out this check, puts Tesla's name on it, signs the check, and says, in fact, he doesn't sign the check. He puts Tesla's name on it, and he gives the check to Tesla. And he says, "When you're done, you give me back this check, you fill in the amount, I'll sign it, if you can get this working." Well, Nikola Tesla works, he's a young man at this point, works the entire weekend, doesn't sleep, literally, right through for almost 72 hours from Friday to Monday morning. He's working. He gets it working. "Oh, Master Edison, I fixed it. And here's the check for you to sign. I'm going to fill in all the zeros." And Edison says to Tesla, "You actually believed me? You're so dumb you believe that I would do that? Get out of here." Tesla quit on the spot.
Wow. Yeah, what a heartbreak.
Right on the spot.
Yeah.
What a heartbreak. He was so angry. You don't do this to a guy like him. He felt psychologically abused. That's why when the time came at the end of the 1890s for the Chicago World's Fair, Tesla, Edison, and General Electric put together a bid to light the Chicago World's Fair. And the bid was rejected. And the GE people that Edison, it was Edison's company, believed, well, nobody could do what we can do. So they submitted a lower bid. Along comes Tesla and George Westinghouse. And they submit a bid half of what Edison submitted. And they got the contract, and they lit the Chicago World's Fair. And from that point on, Edison hated Tesla more than any other human being on the planet.
Going back to the concept of communication and speaking to spirits or the energy that once was us, what was the philosophy of how they would impress? Energy is one thing. I know radio signals are something that can be picked up and translated, but our soul is not a radio frequency, at least not something that we can measure. How do they feel that the voices are coming through in actual communication?
And that's where Thomas Edison ran afoul of his own children and his own board members and the church. The church was furious that Edison was doing these experiments because they said he was actually, as you just pointed out, he was violating the nature of the soul itself. You see, we think of these abrupt shifts in cultural history when in fact they're just transitions. So along about 1850, right after Edison was born in 1847, right starting in the 1850s and coming to its peak in the 1860s through the end of the 19th century was called as you mentioned before, the Great Age of Spiritualism. And one of the great promulgators of the Great Age of Spiritualism was Madame Blavatsky, Helena Blavatsky. And the Great Age of Spiritualism seized the psyche of all of the Western world, Europe and the United States, in the latter part of the 19th century. At that time, you also had very serious scientists, William Koch and Freud and Jung and Einstein and Planck and Heisenberg, all doing their experiments. Now, for a second, let's pull back the camera. What was the argument of the people who believed in the Great Age of Spiritualism? Well, ghosts, spirits, manifestations, ectoplasmic manifestations, as in Ghostbusters. In other words, they believed there was a whole world of the unseen that could manifest itself, but that affects the seen. So the invisible affecting the visible. Now translate this to science for a second. What do you get? The theory of atomic energy, right? You can't see atoms. You can't see an atom, but yet we're made of atoms. You can't feel. You have no ability to feel atomic energy, but yet you know it's there. So the scientists took that theory of the unseen affecting the seen, the invisible affecting the visible, and they translated it into scientific terms. So instead of spirituality, talk about electricity. Instead of ghosts affecting what you do and how you think of it more as the power of your own psyche that you don't feel on an everyday basis, but that is influencing your very decisions. Hence Sigmund Freud. Or that human beings share this invisible system of beliefs, Carl Jung. Or that there is energy that you, the human being, can predict how it will go. Werner Heisenberg and the uncertainty theory. So all these scientists at the end of the 19th century took the theory of the great age of spiritualism, the unseen affecting the seen, and translated that into science. And that so aroused Edison's curiosity that was the reason he said, well, if there's this from the 1860s and 1870s, and there's this from the 1890s and the 1900s, I can actually take electrical engineering, science, and develop a device that will harmonize the two, that will unite the two. And that was the theory behind Edison's ghost phone.
Now, you said, and I know we'll talk about this more off the air, but you've heard responses coming from a version of this phone?
Yes, I haven't, but psychics have. And they said that if you develop a device like this and can make that beam as narrow as possible, then you would see spikes on that meter. The psychics actually stopped Edison from doing it. And the scientists who were there shut it down. I mean, this was not like three people sitting around a table, Dave. This was Edison had a bunch of scientists, real scientists, in the room with him, psychics in the room with him, and they got into a big fight. They just got into this big fight. What are you doing, Dr. Edison? What are you doing, Professor Edison, Master Edison? This is spiritualism. This is crazy. And the occultists were saying, we're about to make a great discovery. We're about to actually find a way to take spiritualism, what we believe in, and the science of electrical engineering that you're developing, and we're going to mate the two. We're going to marry the two. But the scientists refuse to do it. Let's do it.
Do you think that there's, obviously there have been Frank's boxes and Spirit boxes and the SB7 and Shack Hacks and all of these different designs, which are basically radios that have been altered to scan frequencies, seeking these random audio bits where communication appears to come through. I've used them and I've found them fascinating. I've had some results that I cannot explain away with just coincidence. Do you believe that these are very rudimentary versions of what Tesla and Edison were discussing and the concept that they were creating?
This is exactly what Edison believed. And that's exactly what Tesla believed. More than Edison, Tesla believed this. Tesla devoted the whole latter part of his life to proving that this was real. From the radio tower at Wardenclyffe to what he was doing in Colorado to what he was doing. I mean, Tesla's theories about alternative universes, alternative science, alternative life forms, my prediction is that before the end of the century, we will discover that what a lot of Tesla was experimenting with was real. For example, right now, as we speak, NASA is now planning another trip to the Saturn moon of Titan. Why? Because we believe there is water on the surface of Titan. We believe there are dried water beds on Titan. We believe, NASA believes, that it is as likely as it is unlikely that we might find rudimentary life forms on Saturn's moon Titan, that we are not alone in our own solar system. Fascinating. And they might find it out by 2050.
Here's the thing. I don't think anybody believes that there aren't basic rudimentary life forms out there, but what about full-on ETs? Do you believe that is something that exists, that there are individuals like us spread throughout the galaxies that are maybe not necessarily looking like us, but are living, breathing, intelligent creatures that have created and formed their own societies?
Yes, and I believe we will discover them. I believe they have discovered us. In fact, I'm going to go really way out on a limb and say that really what I believe at the core, we've already met E.T. And E.T. is us. We're the E.T.s. That's how we came here. I mean, you're seeing this now. Look at the planet. Look at the comet Borisov that came through our solar system, spinning in exactly the wrong way. Look at the other comet that we've just discovered, besides Borisov, that just came through. We believe that these celestial bodies, these comets, that are all literally they're spinning the wrong way. I mean, the orbit, the trajectory of Borisov coming through the solar system, it's spinning, it's rotating, it's flipping itself upside down. When you get the description of how this comet is moving through our solar system, the closest thing that I believe that's analogous to this is a lawn sprinkler. And if it's a lawn sprinkler, what's it sprinkling? Well, we know there's water on these comets. And they're sending water out through the universe. And if there's water, where water exists, more often than not, life exists. And if they're spewing viruses throughout our solar system, they're terraforming. That is, I believe, how we got here.
Very cool. The book, again, we have a link to it today, Edison versus Tesla, the battle over their last invention. Have you had a chance to see something that works that you believe truly is communicating with the dead, Bill?
Yes, because believe it or not, I have to tell you, this is one of the strangest stories. After my mother died, left the funeral with my cousin. This is years and years ago. Left the funeral. I mean, I'm old. Left the funeral with my cousin, and we're sitting in the one luncheonette my mother loved. Loved this luncheonette. Right around the corner from where she lived. Loved it. I mean, same luncheonette that I used to go to when I was a kid in Queens. And I'm sitting there and we're talking, and it's like, this has been terrible, right? And I'm literally having a chocolate egg cream in this luncheonette. And I see this person walking in, and I look up and I say, it can't be. It's my mother. Dressed the way she dresses, walking the way she talks, looking the way she talks. And this person actually looks directly at me, smiles, and then walks right by me. And when I look behind me, it's a different person entirely. And I said, and the thing is that I felt so good. And I realized, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be. I've just seen her ghost. Things are fine. So, yeah, my own experience tells me that's
very cool. Well, Bill, thanks again for visiting with us. It's always a pleasure catching up with you, sir, and we'll look forward to talking to you with your next books.
Thank you. And I just want to put in one plug for a book that we just put up.
Please.
That is relevant to today. Can I mention it?
Yes.
You know all the talk that's going on right here. A lot of talk, right? Did this COVID-19 virus, was it a weapon? Was it a bioweapon? Did it come from a bat? What did it do? Well, we published a book. Years ago, we've republished it. It's called Unrestricted Warfare. And this book is about the premise of warfare in the 20th to the 21st century. So we're not going to destroy the planet anymore. We're not going to we're not going to blow the place up. All the way back before the Middle Ages, there was a Chinese author called Sun Tzu. And Sun Tzu wrote this manual for princes, a lot like Machiavelli in the Renaissance, but his manual for princes was called The Art of War. Because before the development of modern China, all the various now it's the provinces of China, but there were separate empires, and they were fighting wars. And Sun Tzu was one of like the John Bolton for one of these empires. And he wrote a book about what he called asymmetric warfare. And his theory was that the way to conquer an enemy, two things. And Phil Corso was a Sun Tzu scholar, the Day After Roswell guy, Phil Corso, scholar to Sun Tzu, who said if two parties are at war and one party doesn't know it's at war, but the other party does, the other party always wins. And that was Sun Tzu's theory. But instead of a shooting war, or in his case, a bow and arrow war, the war was economic, political, and propaganda, and a guerrilla warfare. And in today's world, that's exactly what's going on now. That's what Russia used, using our own social media. And there's a theory that that's exactly what China was developing in Wuhan, seeing could we weaponize now, because all these viruses like H1N1 bird flu, swine flu, SARS, COVID-19, all these originate in an animal population. But what if scientists could not just weaponize it, but transfer these weapons? That was the theory of the art of war. And so this book that we did called Unrestricted Warfare is written by the People's Liberation Army, describing the very thing that's going on today. So folks can get that on Amazon right now, Unrestricted Warfare.
Very cool. Thank you, Bill. We'll make sure that we include a link for the book as well to Unrestricted Warfare. That's it for this week, kids. We will be back Tuesday, brand new True Crime Tuesday. Next week, all new of the best in paranormal talk radio, brand new Darkness Radio next Saturday and Sunday. And don't forget Thursday, set your DVRs for Travel Channel. I'll be doing the Kindred Spirits special with Amy, Chip, and Adam Barry. It'll be taking place Thursday on Travel Channel. That's it for this week. For Tim Dennis, I'm Dave Schrader. You've been listening to Darkness Radio.